Yo, what's going on everybody? AA Ryan here, welcome back to PanNerdia. Welcome back to another Let's Paint. This week, Vegeta and Oozaru Vegeta. So we're going to focus on all the things we've learned so far, including figure, form, background, landscape, all that in today's painting. So go ahead and grab a 24 by 18 inch canvas and go ahead and paint it gray like we always do. Helps us with contrast and later on. Speaking of color, go ahead and grab your acrylic paints. That's being phthalo blue, bright red, chrome yellow, yellow oxide, burnt umber, burnt sienna, cadmium orange, aqua green, Mars black, and titanium white. Those are the names that you'll find in the store. As we go though, I will simplify some of the names. Yellow oxide being gold, burnt sienna being light brown. The regular brown, that's gonna be burnt umber. All right, teal, aqua green, etc. Now, as far as brushes go ahead and grab a flat 10, a flat 2, a round 1, and a round 2. If you painted with us last week, those are the same brushes we used. We're gonna go ahead and use those again. All right, so jumping into step 1, let's go ahead and sketch our Vegeta and Oozaru Vegeta. So go ahead and grab your smaller brushes. It can be one of the rounds or the small flat, whatever you feel comfortable with. The round being more smooth lines and the flat being a nice chiseled sharp line. Now we're just going to use white paint to start off with. White paint's really great for sketching with, especially against a gray background. You can always wipe it off or paint gray back over if anytime you mess up. So go ahead and grab small brush white paint and start up at the center of the canvas about an inch or so down. That's going to be where we're placing the elbow of the big Great Ape to get started and starting to angle down where the hair is going to be of his head as well. You guys saw the image at the beginning, and just a reminder, you guys can always pause the video as we're going through and you know, to catch up, take your time and really see what I'm doing here. So we'll connect that top of the forearm to the elbow there after we've painted that bicep down to kind of match the hair. Jump down to about center of the canvas, just move over to the left to kind of match the arm there. That's going to be essentially where we put Vegeta's head. All right, typical V chin and jaw line up to that another little M shape for the widow's peak and doodle his hair. Jump down and start with his arm, also that elbow crook, the elbow kind of lining up to about the center mark of the canvas there. I'm going to jump up now, redefine that hair as well of the Great Ape. Again, mistakes will be made during this, so remember you can always use gray paint to essentially erase and resketch what you need. All right. So we're jumping over there, put some armor on Vegeta, bringing that up you know, halfway up his face there on the right side of his face, and bringing the armor over towards the center, back down, and bringing the chest part of his armor underneath that forearm there. Gonna bring the bicep down, or the chest from the bicep of the big ape, and then jump over to his widow peak. You can always use references of your own painting to bring over certain points, this being the widow's peak from the wrist line. Now if I remember right, I do end up painting over and kind of resketching the head. Because as you go, you may size something up a little different. Though I do want to emphasize why I'm not editing out this part. Simply because, look, even I'm going to make mistakes. I want to show you that it's easy to fix things, not leave you hanging if you end up getting to a point that's either confusing for you or giving you trouble. All right. So following along there, I'm doing some ridges for that nose. All right, mixing together a little more gray paint, and there you go. See, I'm gonna keep the widow's peak for the most part. Actually, I take that back. I'm not, but I'm gonna, you know, keep the old one kind of there as a reference of where the new one will go. All right, again, I'm lining up things. The crook of that arm over for the crook of the mouth there. I want to have the bottom of its jawline kind of matching up to the armor plate of Vegeta's shoulder. Now redoing the forehead and widow's peak there. have it about the same height. I just cut it in quicker, that way I can add the eyebrow, add those nose ridges, and bring the eyes over. I'm zooming in here for you too, by the way, so you guys can see what I'm doing. Go ahead and place his ear there and finish off his hair and bring down that shoulder from the other side. As things dry, I kind of re-emphasis jaw lines and mouth structures, but I kind of want to mark out where I can get Vegeta's arm to go, as well as Big Ape's shoulders and arm. Get his big shoulder plate painted in there. It's about 2 inches wide at the same angle you did his back. Have it round off there right at the end, so you emphasize the football padding nature of that. Now again here, I'm going to go ahead and start sketching out this arm, but be wary that I will end up shifting it here a little bit later, painting over big chunks of it and kind of giving it a redo. Again, which is okay. I ended up painting it too big in the first round here. But this gives you a good chance to see how I will paint the rest of the arm, where I want it to match up. It's coming at about a 45-degree angle down towards the center of the canvas from his shoulder pad there. All right, and then you can go ahead and start lining up Vegeta's legs from that point too. I kind of want the wrists of the Oozaru to match up right there on his left legs, his left, but our right side, that middle leg there, as it bends in, right where I'm painting it, right there. Regardless of when I switch up the arm, I do want that to be a reference point for his leg. All right. As I try to fit the fist on the canvas, sometimes you just gotta take the L, and I end up putting, you know, for the sake of me not repainting everything with the Great Ape, I'll readjust that fist and take the L and not have the whole thing on the canvas. You can see I finished off Vegeta's other leg there as well, bringing it down and getting most of that foot and leg on the canvas there. The fist though, like I said, I'm bringing it down off the canvas, angling it up. Mess around this arm here for a minute, and as I go I'm still thinking about changing things, but I can start getting the body of the ape painted in and where I want this Vegeta's arm to go. I'll be zooming in there for you. Alright, kind of reshape some of that arm. Alright, just reestablishing some lines and line work here if I need to. Painting some knees in there. The crotchal region of the big ape. That's where I'm coming back to the arm and trying to figure out how I can fit that in. But ultimately I need to readjust some things, right? Like I said earlier, go ahead and paint his tail there as well. Use your small brush to swoop that up. Readjusting things. Really, again, like I said, take this time to just, you know, be honest with yourself. And if you feel like you need to adjust something, just take the time to do it, because now is the time. But in the meantime, we can go ahead and as we're figuring stuff out, this will help. Grab your other small brush. Or, you know, the same one, just make sure it's clean, and grab some black paint. We're going to do a general outline here to start bringing things into focus. So, after I start, I'm going to go back up to kind of where I started at with the white paint, using the black paint just to outline, chisel out what I've painted so far. You know, I got a little antsy there with the face, so I really want to start molding it out. I knew it was looking a little blobby. We'll zoom in there for you, but this is where you can start getting some detail, not only in like the hair and the jawline, but the ridges on the nose, the sharp eyes, the nostrils. You'd even sketch some of the teeth in there as well as you get going. This includes, you know, messing with like fingers and knuckles and hands and separations. And I believe once I'm back down to the arm is when I discover I need to readjust and repaint it on the spot there, which is perfect because this is the time to do it. Making that tongue come back around. Oozaru's face is looking a lot nicer now. Alright. He's got his big bushy sideburns you gotta paint, and they connect up to his spiky hair. Remember, it's Vegeta, so his hair will come up and kind of go up to that big leafy peak at the top. Painting his diamond ear in. Painted those hair chunks a little too much. Shorten them up a little bit. And just use green paint to erase stuff out. If it's a little darker, it's okay, but that's what's great about using just black, white, and gray to sketch your painting out. This is at least how I do it. Other folks use pencils and whatnot, before, and kind of block and color. I just like the freedom of being able to change on the go. Get comfortable with what I want before I just block in colors. Plus, you can say you hand painted everything. So jumping down here, the Vegeta normal form. Go ahead and outline his hair, get that started. Get his jaw line kind of focused in as well as which I didn't do with the white paint because they're smaller features than our usual paintings. I'm just going to go ahead and use black paint with my number 1 round brush to really get those details in. No, I am using white paint here. Look at that. White paint just to fill in those eye blocks, but I'm going to go to the black paint with the small number 1 brush to really get in there with details. But now since I have those eyes blocked in, it'll be easy to get those eyebrows set. Get the middle angry part of the eye. Suppose the other. Get the nose set, the mouth, etc. Use that number 1 round really lets you get in there for sharp detail with real thin marks, and line work, so you don't have to worry about going back in there and kind of taking away some of that thicker black paint. Remember also to use water while you're painting. That always helps not only thin out your paint, but keep any paint that's drying in your brush, from kind of congealing and kind of gunking up. You can always just thin it out as you go. That kind of, not only makes the paint a little more resilient and last longer, but again, with these smaller brushes, kind of turns into like almost an inky consistency. That way you can get in there with all your fine details. Now, as we go on, especially with the smaller detail stuff, this is more for my sake here, and I'm zooming in here, that way you can see what I'm doing. But for my own sake, I want to get these details nice and sharp now, so when I'm blocking colors in, it's not going to be this real smudgy mess of having to change parts of the face. When I'm painting over black, wet black paint with skin tones and whatnot, I can kind of have things dry. So as we paint, it becomes more of a paint by number-esque scenario where I'm kind of just blocking in the colors and then reestablishing line work later. All right. But speaking of line work, we're jumping down here to the chest. A lot of tight line work with the kind of trim of the armor, not only from around the neck but by the chest, even up to the edge of the leather yellow plates on the armor, from the shoulders to the pad. All right, again, just making sure every once in a while, instead of just grabbing more watered down black paint, give your brush a quick rinse and dry and grab a new coat of that paint. Again, that way the paint doesn't start gunking up on your brush and you start losing some bristle length because you're getting congealed paint on there. But jump down to the arm there, make sure you got the shoulder, the back of the tri, the bi, up to his forearm, to where he'll be eventually holding an energy ball to turn him into the Great Ape. The power orb, or whatever it's called, I forget exactly, but regardless, I have it zoomed in here for you so you can see what I'm doing with the fingers. Alright, painting underneath the chest there. Now, I did make that belly part of the armor just a little thin at the top there, but we can always come fix that later. I will kind of come in here now and start hitting the legs up, getting some muscle definition in there. He is wearing tights, and also where the knee is at. It's taken a lot of stuff we've learned from doing these figures, and in this piece, not only do we have, you know, small detail, you know, we're getting the idea of layering with outline, but we're also dealing with some, you know, bigger foreshortened features. So ignore the arm that is painted in black now. Just jump over here to his chest. I will be erasing a big chunk of that arm, so go ahead and save yourself. But jumping over to the chest of the Great Ape, I can go ahead and get the trimming of the chest painted in there, and as well as the belly, and kind of get the start of the armor plate of the belly up, and get the trim of the shoulder plates painted in as well, as well as the back and the top of the shoulder. Get the cracked armor plate up there painted in too. Right, make sure you remember that because he has got a cracked armor plate on his right shoulder. I will go ahead and kind of sketch out where a leg could be at for him underneath that arm, but don't worry about it too much, because here in just a moment I will be painting over this arm, allowing you to see where my actual mess up is. But a big part of it is just because I'm doing the fist. Look, I took the L and I can't get the whole hand on, and it's going to continue to be like that, but I want to get a little bit more on there and kind of line things up, not make some of the arm as big as it is, mainly the bicep, and then that way I can fit a little bit more of that hand on there. But at this point I'm trying to really fix it and make it work, and it's just not really coming together as I like. So sometimes you gotta take even another L and grab that big brush, the big flat number 10, make some gray paint, a whole bunch of it, and just paint it on out. That's right, paint it on out. Hey, I want to figure out a better way to make these videos and, you know, somehow speed them up for you, but I can't really when I'm trying to explain to you how to really draw or paint, I should say, you know, hands drawing / sketching with a paintbrush. You know, there's a lot of detail there, and it takes some time. So this time I'm going straight black paint, jumping up, make sure that bicep lines up with the belt or the bottom of Vegeta's upper armor. Same with that forearm, bringing it over, and some curvature to that top of the glove. Again, I do want to use the wrist as a marker right there next to Vegeta's inner knee, but I can bring that thumb over a little bit more towards Vegeta's right leg. Now, a lot of what I painted before will end up coming as a slight, you know, precursor where I can kind of trace and get an idea of the space that the glove's occupying. But again, I can kind of fit a little bit more knuckle in there and still emphasize the fact that, hey, he's, you know, punching into the foreground here, some big old hands. Sometimes though, you can't get the whole hand on there, so we'll take what we can get and really make it work here. Alright, just be sure to use your gray paint if you need to. Might seem a little darker there, but at that point we can really chisel everything out, including the you know, bottom of the bicep, top of the forearm, and you know, get the placement right. I'll bring that bicep just up that way a little more, make it a little thicker there. Add some darker emphasis on the edge of his hand, just to slightly thicken that up too. I'm gonna iron out this part of the hand a little bit using some lighter gray paint. There we go. Bringing that finger back a little bit too, which is allowing me to paint a little bit more of the fingers. Say, adjusting, right? We'll get more fingers in this piece yet. Yikes. But just use this time to adjust and really make the piece work for you, because after we get done with this, we're going to be jumping in the color. And you know, at this point, At least want to get things right. That includes even his fist here and his elbow. Now we use that as our starting point, right? But again, this is your chance to kind of readjust things. So though I use that as my starting off point, it helped me really frame the rest of the painting and kind of adjust that a little bit now. Bring the arm a little bit past, including the elbow, past the center point this time. Bring that forearm down and that fist a little further as well. Though some of it is being covered up by Vegeta's hair. It's all right. It seems better now, right? It's not as scrunched up and unnatural. We're able to bring it out a little bit and give his body some width. That way it's a little more believable. Go ahead and take that big brush, clean it off, and mix together 1 scoop of blue paint, 1 dab of red paint, and a dab of white paint. Get that blue color and go ahead and start blocking in the color. Now, be sure to pause if you need to see exactly what spots you're painting blue. If you're a Vegeta fan, you should know the spots, but if you need to see where I'm going with it, go ahead and follow now. But I use my big brush primarily for the Great Ape, and I switched to my smaller flat for Vegeta. Again, you can go to one of your smaller round brushes as well that help get into the nooks and crannies. But if you need to remix some more of that blue, go for it. Again, it's 1 scoop of blue, 1 dab of red, and a dab of white. All right. Even if you want to jot that down or mark where this is in the video, about 22 minutes in, come back and get that color later because you'll need it when we do a recoat. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and move over to step 3 now. That's going to be our first layer of the white armor. So with your big brush, be sure to clean it off and grab 2 scoops of white paint, a dab of black paint, and a dab of gold, which is that yellow oxide. Alright, mix that together and use one of your smaller brushes, preferably that small flat, and paint the left side of the gloves, your left, and kind of bring it over into the gray that's already there. That's for both gloves there. See, I'm kind of using the gray as my shadow already. And as I zoom in here in these various spots, you can see how I'm using my finger as well to kind of smudge out some of the white for blending. I'm going to kind of block in this hand here for now, and I'm not going to worry about necessarily detail. I can come back to that later, but I can hit all the trim up around the armor pieces. Alright, being very light-handed with where I put this white paint. Alright, and jumping into one of my smaller round brushes there to paint in little Vegeta. Now I'll start with the outlines of the trim and then just use little bits of white that's left on my brush to kind of fill in lightly the spots on his armor. Go ahead and paint in the boot as well, get it adjusted, and any other little spots of white trim that you feel like you need to do. Again, this is first layer, we're just blocking in color, so we'll come back in a little bit to add some more layers and actually bring some gray into it and help really level everything out. Alright, now moving on to step 4, we're going to go ahead and fill in the yellow body armor. So go ahead and clean off that big brush, and once it's good and ready to go, grab 2 scoops of that yellow oxide, or we're going to call it gold here, 1 scoop of white paint, a dab of yellow paint, and a dab of black paint. Alright, it's going to end up just making it nice here. Go ahead and use your big brush to fill in the big spots, and your smaller brush to get in to the tighter spots. Not only your one of your round brushes, but also your flat brush too. Alright. And again, you can always use your gray paints or your little brush with black paint to kind of clean up outlines as you go if you need to, if you kind of go outside the lines, etc. Alright. We go in there and just fill out those spots of body armor with that yellow, remembering that we're going to be coming back later to add another coat of the yellow paint of all these colors first off, so don't worry if a lot of the gray is showing through. So with step 5, we're going to go ahead and paint the first layer of the fur and the hair on not only the Oozaru but little Vegeta. So for the fur mix, go ahead and mix a scoop of your brown paint, that's your burnt umber, with a scoop of black paint, and a dab of white paint. Go ahead using your flat number 5 brush and go ahead and start filling in the Oozaru's hair. That's the only hair he really has showing. We will paint the tail later, but we'll have that mix ready to go. For Vegeta's hair, you ultimately want to make a slightly lighter mix, so use that same mix and go ahead and just add, or I'm sorry, slightly darker mix I should say. Go ahead and add a dab of black paint to that previous mix. Stir it up to make it darker and use that small brush, any one of your choosing really, to go ahead and fill in Vegeta's hair. We want a slight essence of that brown from before with the Oozaru and Vegeta's hair. You know, sometimes with the Saiyans, when the light hits it, you can see the other colors besides just the black hair. So we're gonna add that slight little bit of brown in that black hair as well to make things work. But once you're ready, clean that brush off, and we'll get ready for step 6. We're gonna mix our skin tone together for Vegeta. That being 2 scoops of white paint, 1 scoop of brown paint, that's burnt umber, and a dab of orange. All right. Use your small brush, of course, to start filling in Vegeta's face. Using your number 1 round brush if you need to really get into those tight spaces. Some of the line work will get lost. If you really feel like you need to, straighten it up here, like I am doing with the eyes. So reestablishing some of the eye lines, the middle of the eye, the nose, and where the mouth's at. Kind of keep those little details sharp because they'll get lost the quickest. So if you can stay up on that, you'll be good to go. Not a lot of skin tone showing all that much. You noticed when we painted the blue armor and stuff earlier that we left a patch on his shoulder. So we do want to make sure that's filled in with color too as we go. But we'll get to that. As far as the big Great Ape, we'll end up adding some darker tones for the skin. Kind of opposite of how we did the hair. But continuing here, just making sure I add some necklines and adjusting that as I go too. Because I don't want to keep those high detailed areas still manageable. That way I don't get too lost in the sauce here. The sauce being the paint, that is. And losing track of what I painted or getting things a little too muddy for later. All right. But that means you also can use a little white paint to reestablish some parts of the eye or the teeth, etc. But that's even including the little eye lines underneath Vegeta's kind of cheeks areas there. That typical Dragon Ball little dash for the cheekbone ridges. Alright, so we want to work on the Oozaru skin as well. Be sure to take the previous mix we're using and just add a scoop of brown and a dab of black to it. That's going to kind of make a shadowy toned skin. We can use that to fill in the Oozaru. Again, using your smaller brush. That way we can kind of avoid painting over the blocked lines of detail on the Oozaru, including his eyebrows, his nose ridges, etc. So again, you can always grab your black paint and readjust as you're going here. Make sure nothing's lost in the sauce. There's not a lot of skin showing on the ape. It's really just his face and his ear. So just use this time to fill that in. But step 7 here, we want to paint in the eyes and get started on the mouth. So for the red eyes, go ahead and mix a scoop of red with a dab of white. Fill those in, and then add another scoop of white to the mix for the pink of the tongue and mouth. You can then add a dab of black paint to that mix and make the darker tones of the mouth, including the back of Vegeta's throat as well. I went ahead and filled in his tail with brown as well. And then here with step 8, we're going to go ahead and add teeth using our number 1 round brush. The teeth are already there, but we want to just go ahead and outline them and add a little bit more, kind of trailing back as working on the mouth here. And then here too, you can start adjusting the figure. Like I said, I went by a little quick. But we can paint in Vegeta's tail. Go ahead and just use some burnt umber with a dab of black and paint that in, and then adjust anything else you want on the figure at the moment. Alright, so we're going to go ahead and put our first layer of the background on there. Go ahead and take your big brush and clean it off, and grab a scoop of that bright aqua green, which we'll call teal here, a scoop of blue, and a scoop of white. Go ahead and paint the top third of the canvas with that blue, using one of your smaller brushes if you need to kind of get up close to the figure and in between the hair and whatnot. But again, you just want to block in this color. Be sure to use a little water with the paint too, that way it's still wet for this next part of the sky, which will be the middle third. So once you're done filling that in, go ahead and clean your big brush. Alright, and in the pile you already have, go ahead and add a scoop of red and a scoop of white to that mix. Stir it around and go ahead and blend up from about halfway to a little bit below a third up into the sky, and blend that light blue and that lavender color together. Alright, go ahead and try to follow it up through the jeets and over to the other side of the canvas as well. Alright, if you need to, you can grab some of that light blue and bring it back down to that lavender to get a nice blend going. Alright, whatever works for you. But once you're happy with that blend, just essentially going up and back and down back through each color, you get that nice gradient going. And go ahead and clean your big brush and mix 2 scoops of light brown with a scoop of gold, which is that yellow oxide. Light brown being the burnt sienna, also with a dab of red, a dab of white, and go ahead and mix those together to get that nice kind of terracotta brick red, and paint the bottom third of the canvas. Now, you do want to leave a little platform underneath Vegeta's feet as a blank area of the canvas, because we will bring some yellow into there. And to do that, you just want to add a scoop of white to the mix you already have, with a dab to a half scoop of yellow. Stir that around, and you'll get that nice kind of brick yellow color, mountain colored yellow to paint underneath Vegeta. Give him something to stand on. Alright, so now we want to go ahead and move on to the second layer of shadow in the blue spandex of both Oozaru and big little Jeets, I should say. So go ahead and paint another layer of blue if you need to here, if some spots weren't filled in all the way. Same blue mix as before. Once you get that mix together, go ahead and split it up. Add a little black to one mix, add a little white to the other mix. We use that for the shadows and highlights. You can see there on Big Jeet's arm, I have the highlight to the left side of our left side, and the shadow to the right. It's going to help define some of the muscles as we get going here, really make them pop out. So you can see here I'm redefining there with that normal blue, the blue that we started with, right? And I'm just refining those shapes on the left where I have brought that darker blue on the outsides, and also bring that lighter blue in around the muscles. And I can add a little bit more white for that light blue to really make a nice sheen on the edge of the biceps there. Alright, so be sure to coat in the other arm as well. That arm will be a little more lighter because it is up closer to the light source of the sky. But we're also going to be focusing on adding the shadows of the little details. So you use your little brush to get into the shadow details of little Jeet's arm and his legs and whatnot, which if I remember, try to zoom in here so you can see where I'm going with this. Make that darker blue more into the crevices and underneath parts, where you can get that lighter blue sitting on top of that to kind of have that nice contrast, so the muscles and the bends in the muscles really show. But don't worry, we'll ultimately be adding another outline layer on in a little while. That'll really start bringing things out. we can start filling in the blue of the Great Ape's leg in between little Jeet's legs there. Even mess with the shadows over here on his leg going off canvas. And if you ever want to make some other parts just a little darker, just add a little more black paint, or a little lighter, add a little more white paint to that main blue that we started with, and you can get the different variations of that color to you know, let you paint either highlights or shadows. But just kind of going around here, checking the spots I need to bring out, really having that contrast show, especially where little Jeets is standing in front of the ape. We really want those body parts to really contrast out from, you know, places behind. So once you're ready, go ahead and clean off that brush, all your brushes that is, and go ahead and mix together another coat for that armor. And once you're good, go ahead and start painting in that second coat for the gloves and the armor. Now, originally we did use the gray of the canvas to kind of give us some contrast for shadows on this stuff, but we always add a little dab of black to the mix to kind of make our own shadow color and blend in to the white of the glove to get that proper blending. Before it was more of a placeholder, but now we can go in here and really add those nice blends, defining the separate knuckles, hands, and tendons in the hand, even showing through to the glove, as well as the folds in the glove and the ripples on the armor. So be sure to switch between the different bright white of the armor and the gray. You can also switch to your black paint and small brush and refine outlines as you go. Now, we are going to do another outline step moving forward here in a little bit, but as you go, like we did with the faces earlier, you can go in there and add some outlines for your own sake to really kind of shape and sharpen things up, because sometimes you know, you can get a little overboard and things start to become too fizzled out or get lost. So it's good to kind of you know, take your time and excel things a little further if you need to for your own sake, that being the outline for the glove. But also is like the fact that I haven't, you know, painted fingers in yet over on the right hand. After you get a little blending in there using that darker color, you can go in and grab the black paint and really paint in where you want those fingers to sit, in the fist there behind small Jeets. But speaking of this is, you know, you can, you know, paint the fingers on the smaller hands as well, get those defined, as well as any spots of the armor you feel like you need to bring out, like the trim of the armor, which, you know, can start getting lost as you paint more layers over the top of it. So just know that at any point you can stop, pause the video, and kind of recheck through things to make sure you're where you want to be, as well as go ahead and outline and shape things that you feel you need to, you know, for your own sake. You know, whatever makes you feel more comfortable as you're painting this, you can do that. You can add more layers of a certain color. You can switch up colors. You can start defining lines and shapes as you go. But speaking of details here, you can see how I'm going back into the hands, adding more of that now gray that we created out of the white armor color to kind of get blending. So for step 12, go ahead and paint the second layer of the yellow. So be sure to clean off your brush and mix that original yellow color together. Go ahead and fill in the armor plates with it, and then just like before with the white armor, with this yellow paint, go ahead and just add a dab of black paint to that to create the shadow. And we'll essentially do this underpainting of the shadow before we come back and add the lines of the armor, mainly because it'll kind of help us set up the plate effect later on. So speaking of that, we're over here next to the jaw of the ape, and we're going to round that off and bring it up the side of the trim. Looks like it's kind of a peanut shape on that armor. And then over here on small Jeets, stick to the right side of the canvas for his yellow armor parts, with the darker tone there, and we'll keep the highlighted spot to the left of the canvas, his right, hence where the energy ball he's holding will be at, and that light source. All right. Always put the shadows as farthest away as you can from the light source. When you have a multiple light source piece like this, think about little Jeets and big Jeets being on separate planes. They are the same character, but they're different. Little Jeet's light source is mainly going to be where the energy ball coming out of his hand is, and big Oozaru is going to be mainly from the sun. Alright. But once we're done with the gold there, we can go ahead and add the second layer of the skin. That includes using the original color that we had there, as well as adding some shadow color as well. So take that original mix of two brown, two white, one brown, and a dab of orange, and add a dab of black to that, half that pile for your shadow color, and take another half of that pile and go ahead and add some white to it for highlights. All right. With Jeets, small Jeets, like I said, the light source is in his hand there, so put the shadow furthest away on his face over on the right side, his left side, and add the highlights closer to where the ball is at. All right. Now for the Great Ape skin, I'm not going to have you mix together a whole nother batch of Vegeta skin for that, since you split it up. So we'll go ahead and mash it all together for the Oozaru skin. So you want to mix together 3 scoops of brown, 2 scoops of white, a half scoop of black, and a dab of orange. Give you that other ape skin coat. Now it'll be slightly darker than before. That's okay, because what we can do, pardon me, is add just a tiny bit of white to that to make our highlights, and a tiny bit of black to that to make our shadows. The shadows will kind of be chiseled out via the lighter paint that we're using here. Kind of hit up on the forehead like I'm showing you there. Over on, think about him kind of similar to the other Jeets. You have the left side of the painting for the highlights, dark side for shadows, but it's more of a top light on the, light from above at an angle for the big ape. So you can kind of paint all these shadows kind of underneath and to the bottom right as you're going. That includes like over to the right side of the face and under the jaw. And then of course, if you need to, you can clean up the hair a little bit. But speaking of that, we'll go ahead and paint the other coat. So get that same color as before for big Jeets. Again, you can pause the video and check out that further back, but then add a scoop of white to the hair for the highlights. Use your smaller flat brush for that particularly to get some nice sharp angles. Alright. We'll also have that same mix for little Jeet's hair as we did before. Slightly darker. Go ahead and fill that in, reshape the spikes and sharpness of his hair, as well as add a little bit of white to that mix, and go ahead and add his little highlights. Try to keep them, if you can think about it, on the left side of each hair chunk, towards where the ball light's at, leaving like a contrasted right side and underneath part of the hair. But now we're back to the outline, the second outline here, to really crisp things up. So use this time to clean your brushes, put some black paint to the side, add a little water to it to thin it out, and grab the brush you're choosing, preferably the number 2 or flat 5 for the big ape, and then switching to your round 1 and round 2 for little Jeets. But again, this is where we can really start bringing out detail. Not only adding some plates to the broken armor over there, we come back and really sharpen up his hair. Alright. Jump over to the eyebrow ridges again, and the face of the ape to really bring things out. Now since we have all the shadows here, look really nice with the way the nose crinkles, and where we end up getting the nostrils to come out at. Everything will really kind of start popping now. Ooh, just like that. But we can paint underneath and around the jaw, get that settled in. and even paint the outlines of the teeth and start getting those to really stand out. Now, we will clean those up more as we go, but for now, go ahead and block those out. Alright, little line on the tongue too. Alright, adjust anything you need to as you go. You can always grab previous colors of paint if you feel like you've made the line too thick, or painted some black paint into your bright colors. No worries, just go ahead and wipe off what you can without smearing, and bring some of that old color back in. But we can go ahead and outline, any little parts of the glove or his arm or his armor. We're gonna get set up for the plates on the shoulders here in a minute, but it'll be nice because it'll be the way they kind of bend with the shadow you see there. Where I place the shadows where you want to make the bow of the arc. But we can outline the trim there. Notice it's a lot going on with the Saiyan armor. Really bring out these muscles here too now. Not only do we have the darker shadow, but we can bring in these lines that really help even more contrast. But as far as the line and plating on his stomach shield, you can go ahead and keep that with the same curvature as the bottom of his armor. Bring out the muscles in the leg, and then switch over to your round number 1, preferably for the line work on Small Jeet's face, because he's got a lot of little line work, from the classic little dashes under the eyes to his angry wrinkles above his eyes, to the crinkles of his nose and the scowl of his mouth. Alright, all needs to be kind of brought back up through to the surface of the last skin layer. This also includes any neck folds, or the sharp edges of their throat up to his collarbone. You can go ahead and take this time with your small round 1 or round 2 brush to really get in there. But we'll go back around to the edges of the armor as well, and the trim of Small Jeet's armor, still using one of those smaller brushes. Really get the curvature of that broken plate and the cracked underneath surfaces. You can even start really adding to the frayed parts of his spandex here, and we can start detailing the other side of his body and add the plating of that shoulder too. Again, the trim's important with their armor here. The trim essentially just separates like the different muscle groups of the armor, makes it look a little more badass. And like I said, it's important to add those in there. Just as how it is important to add the creases of the muscles in the spandex parts. So coming over here to the legs, you can widen those out with the line. If you still see your line work from before, be sure to follow that. But if some of it's got lost, you can always just follow where I painted at. Alright. But as we paint into the boot here, you can always add the creases to the boots as you go. Alright. But also use this time to adjust any colors that you're going through, right? Any colors of the figures particularly that are not transitioning or translating as well as you thought they were. Take the time to kind of readjust shadows or highlights with your line work. But back to the line work, we're going to outline the one part of the background that we will outline is the platform he's standing on. But here, let me go ahead and zoom in here over here on his chest too, because I'm bringing that out slightly more here. I thought he was just a little too thin there in the stomach, so I'm just going to bring that out a little bit, do a little surgery here. I'll paint in a little more of that gray color that we used for the armor and kind of round out that stomach. It just got a little too thin there. But remember, you can always make adjustments as you go, which is nice. Especially before we start committing to the final parts, final details in the background and all that. So again, just reshaping some things, bringing back down that belly part there. Alright, going up to Jeet's little hand here, he's got clenched in the fist. I'll make sure to zoom in for you there. That way we can finally get the thumb and fingers kind of separated there. Alright, underneath that armor. and as well as the back plate of that armor, which we didn't actually paint in the yellow part yet, but we will later on as we're doing our final steps. He does have a back plate on that armor that's set, so we wanted to emphasize that, as well as outline the tail and emphasize the furry line work texture that you know, the tails are known for. We'll paint up inside his ear to crisp it up as well. Alright, and well, we can't forget about the Oozaru's tail, so we're going to go ahead and just free ball that, get some line work going. Alright, and as for the tail color mix, you're essentially just going to be mixing the same color as his hair, the Great Ape's fur that is, to fill in down on Jeet's tail. Now, as you're going and adjusting, be sure to let just that outline dry and then throw that in. You can even throw in a little white to the fur mix to add some highlights to kind of help contrast a little bit of that tail, make things stand out so it's not just so dark of a blob hanging off the edge of the canvas there. And since it's a bigger tail, you can actually add some fur effect to it, which will be nice. But I think we're done. We're going to go ahead and paint the second layer for the sky and work on some clouds there. So go ahead and take the same mixes that you did before and kind of get another recoat of the sky there. You can mess with the gradient as well with the lavender color if you feel like you need to just shape it up a little bit, make it a little smoother transition. Use this time now to do that, as well as fill in any spots in and around crevices of the figures. All right. But you can always switch to your smaller brushes for those moments. And again, if you need to, you can touch up the lavender part of the sky too. But once we get those colors where we want them, we can go ahead and add the clouds. With the clouds, you want to go ahead and just take some white paint, kind of wipe off some of your paper towel. And we're going to set it at an angle there. Think about following the angle of the back of the ape's arm. I want to just kind of blob in the clouds. And as I blob them in, I want to kind of pull up and away at that angle real lightly. They have that wispiness, all right? Think about us doing it kind of like a pattern, white, blue, diagonal pattern here. Now we will start having them fade down into the purple too, but we just kind of want to start mapping out these blue ones now. As well as be sure to use your paper towel if you need to kind of help smear and smudge in the cloud effects. You can always go back and add more white paint to thicken them up in certain areas if you need to, make them brighter, but you can always just use your paper towel to dim them out. You can see as we're doing that, it's kind of adding this cool atmosphere effect and really giving some space to the painting, really making it seem like things are really far back there. All right, but you can always also use some of the original background sky color to paint back up into the clouds and fade them out if you feel like they're a little too stark. You can always fade them out back into the sky using the old sky color. But as far as the way the rest of the mountains are going to go and the layers we want to work with, you can go ahead and use that same mix for the mountains as before. And just be sure to add a dab of white for the highlights of the rocks here. Now, since the figures take up so much space, we won't focus particularly on separate parts of the mountain range, but just like layers in this orange mountain rock. So again, just adding a dab of white to the same mix for the mountains. You can go ahead and use your small flat brush to paint these horizontal slivers into everything. Here though, I am actually just painting a second coat with that original color there, brightening things up a little bit. So once you're ready with that second coat there, again, you want to just add a little white to that mix, and we can start getting these horizontal lines painted in like so. Start adding that kind of layered rock look. All right. Again, since there's not much background to work with besides, you know, the side spaces and above the figures, we can just be very loose with how we're painting these rock structures. You can always add just a dab of black paint to the littlest bit of that original cliff mix to paint underneath certain highlighted sections as well. That way, you know, there's a little more contrast in between these sandwich layers. Again, that just kind of brings out and pushes back the different cliff edges. You can see there I'm adding that darker spot there, kind of blending into it to make each little layer stand out, make the crevices kind of bulge, and add those little fractures within the rocks as well. Now for the yellow, you essentially just want to have that same yellow mix as before too, and then just add some white paint into it, a little dab of white paint in that yellow mix. And what you'll essentially do is just pretty much the same thing using your small flat brush. Kind of want to paint those horizontal little dashes back and forth on the yellow. That way we can add some of the highlighted parts of the rocks. Now you can also add a little dab of black paint to some of that yellow to get the shadow of Jeets as well. Like underneath him, you're not gonna really worry about the shadow of the Great Ape, but with a big or small Jeets there, you can paint the shadow lines underneath his feet, and the little ridges kind of on the rock as well. All right, and this is adding some texture to everything, kind of making it seem like there's a little space and there's some things going on here. All right, he's not just standing on some perfect yellow blob. But so for the second to last step, the penultimate step, use this time to really just touch things up. Go back the steps you feel like you need to work on. You know, tighten up parts of the figure. You know, reestablish certain colors or line work somewhere that you messed up on. Use this time to touch up the painting before we get to our final details here. And speaking of final details, that includes adding the little scrapes and bits of blood that are you know, on the figures, because they did go in battle. So you know, we want to be sure to add those battle torn areas. So that's what we'll do before we end up adding our final step of the energy ball. But you can see here I'm just kind of going through and adding some, you know, extra line work for the hair there, the ape fur. I'm sharpening things up. I'm bringing back some other colors from the background and foreground to help sharpen things up. Again, you might have lost some more line work when you're doing your sky and your background, so use this time to tighten those areas up. But like I said, we do want to add some battle damage to the figures we painted. As far as the scrapes go, use one of your smaller round brushes, preferably your round 1, but you can use your round 2, and just some black paint, and that's gonna help us add like little scrapes and scratches throughout the piece. But just like I also said before, using you know, previous colors like I'm doing here around the Oozaru eye, you can use that to kind of help, you know, level things off, crisp them up, unmuddy the water, so to speak. You can bring out some extra highlights if you need to, or darken in some spots that you think maybe didn't have enough contrast. Here I actually didn't add any dark brown inside the ear, so I'm doing that there. Underneath the chin a little bit, and kind of cleaning up the areas around his face as well. I know I've mentioned those scrapes and the small details a little bit, but we'll get to them. Speaking of small details, you want to clean up the little teeth there if you can. Line work's a little messy or choppy. as well as any spots you know, around the face, eyes of both figures. But yeah, just again, use this time to really clean everything up, make everything look real nice, and we'll go ahead and move on to the scrapes. Alrighty. So as far as the scrapes go, I'm just touching up little areas here. But again, you just want to grab your small brush with some black paint watered down so it's easy to sketch with, draw with here. We just want to add little dashes here and there for the scrapes on the figure. It's essentially like, you know, dirt and you know, damage. But again, if you need to, use your little wet paper towel and straighten things up. Wipe off little bits of black paint if you went a little too overboard. But yeah, we want to just add a little damage to this so everything kind of starts coming together with these final detail. Makes it, you know, makes it less perfect. Okay, so for the final step here, we want to go ahead and paint the energy ball on the, Vegeta's hands there. You essentially just want to use your small brush, small round 1 or a small round 2, and just grab some white paint. Alright, you're essentially just going to hover about an inch, not even, like a ½ inch over Vegeta's hand, and kind of like right where the chinked shoulder armor and kind of armpit meet. That's where you'll start painting the circle in. Start with that little brush, and again, you just want to start with a little circle in the middle here, right about here, and you just want to kind of swirl and swirl and swirl to get that circle going. And then using that small brush, you want to bring some lines through it. Think of like a cross through it and an X through it. Very thin lines, and then you can add some more shine lines kind of coming in between those. And just think about radiating from the very center part of the orb there, and to kind of really just finish things off, grab a little blue paint, either some of that sky blue you used earlier or a little bit of blue from the you know, spandex, and just paint just the lightest little bit around the edge of that ball there to kind of add some blue tones to it as well. Alright, and ta-da, we're done. So I hope you guys enjoyed the process like I did. Be sure to show me your finished pieces over on Twitter and Instagram, and I'll see you guys next time for another Let's Paint. Till then, check you later.